I'm David Bell. Here's another tall tale and true from the far country. It's all about a prophet. Well, two prophets, one true, one false. The false one's contemporary. A number of years ago, this chap got the bug to be a prophet. Claimed to receive direct communications from the Lord. Hotline to God. Thought they were important messages. Wrote them down. There were a lot. Over a period of months, stretching into a year or more, he got various church leaders to believe he really was under the direct guidance of God when the prophetic frenzy came. Eventually, had the ministers sufficiently on side to allow free rein in certain worship occasions and other settings. You don't need to be a prophet to see what was happening was going to turn into a disaster. Turns out the written communications were nonsense, same with what was spoken in church too. But by now his position was virtually unassailable. His mana among the impressionable was too powerful to break. Worship degenerated to hysteria and emotional manipulation. And eventually the prophecies fizzled out into such utter meaninglessness that the saner people saw the light, and rebellion broke out. The parish council was split right down the middle. Other events in that church caused irrevocable splits in the congregation anyway, from which the church never recovered. What that church had been put through was nothing but a shambles. False prophets are always agents of chaos because their activities have no relation to the nature of prophecy, ancient or modern. But such events and people are common enough. The word prophecy and the idea of a prophet have been thoroughly debased. Many churches have been swept away by people creating a buzz thinking they are prophets. We can do no better than look at Amos to find out what a prophet was and how a prophet worked. Have you ever read Amos? The biblical book of the prophet, I mean. It's a short book, but not particularly cheerful. We find Amos lived about 2 hours south of Bethlehem in a village called Tekoa. Tough place. Wilderness region. Mountaintop desert conditions. Tough conditions can produce some strong characters, stubborn characters. They understand life's realities. Although he lived well out of Jerusalem, Amos was no country bumpkin. He knew what was going on in society. He had studied Israelite history. More than that, he knew what was going on beyond Israel's territory. He made it his business to know. Amos delved deeply into the social and economic conditions in Israel and beyond. In fact, that's where his prophecy springs from. He used his intelligence. He analysed what was happening. He was, to put it in today's terms, an internationalist of sorts. He assessed the strengths and the weaknesses of Israel's system against other systems. He kept thinking about it. Turn matters over in his mind, and then and only then the herdsman began to prophesy. He found great fault in foreign nations as he did in Israel itself. As nations, they all prosecuted unjust wars. They ripped up pregnant women, trampled the poor into the dust of the earth, indulged in all kinds of sexual immorality, offered up meaningless sacrifices, and most importantly, ignored the ethical demands of the Lord God. His prophecies are like barbed little sermons you don't want to sit through. He rebuked leaders. Naturally, his prophecies came to the attention of the king, Jeroboam II, who was clearly unimpressed by this upstart. Told Amos, stop prophesying. Amos couldn't. He said to Jeroboam, I don't belong to any prophetic tradition. I haven't been to a school for prophets, but now this I tell you, destruction is coming to you as king and to our nation. Amos had had a series of visions. First, he saw Israel eaten alive by locusts. Second, he saw Israel destroyed by a fire so great it consumed both the land and the sea. And there was the final vision, which is greatly appealing to me. Amos the prophet saw God standing beside a brick wall holding a plumb line. God would apply the plumb line to the house of Israel. It wouldn't stand square and true. Therefore it was doomed to collapse. Consider these visions. They're not the stuff of ordinary dreams, are they? A nation itself eaten by locusts, a fire that burns away both land and sea, God measuring the morality of a nation with a plumb line. What makes these visions even more compelling and even more strange is that in the middle of the 8th century, while Amos prophesied, Israel was in the grip of unheralded prosperity. Jeroboam was at the height of his powers as a leader. In fact, King Jeroboam too reigned for a further 20 years before he died. Highly successful years. Had he been less secure as a king and leader, he might have had Amos summarily executed. He did not. Instead, Amos was ordered to shut up, because his message was so far out of sync with conditions. He was obviously shunned by people. If you've ever heard about prophets being lonely, that's the case with Amos. So what does it all mean? Was Amos wrong? Yes and no. He was a failed prophet in the sense that his analysis was out of time, out of sync, out of context. But no one ever prophesied more truly than the herdsman of Tekoa in one way. Amos is the first prophet to really spell it out that God is for all nations, not just for Israel. When any nation dishes out rough justice or no justice for its citizens, then God will call that nation to account. That's the extraordinary vision of Amos. The God of Israel is a light for all the nations. What a superb insight. This, above all else, will shape the line of prophets to come after. No longer will prophecy revolve around just the particular. It must have universal validity. So the prophet's message has to have this very wide application, and to conclude, we could summarize Amos this way. His failures were a dismal failure at the time he spoke. He couldn't get a job reference, that's for sure. But one generation on, some 40 years after he died, the collapse of the northern kingdom of Israel was swift, and for the very reasons he said. A lonely prophet indeed, but accurate in part of his analysis, quite unlike our contemporary chap. Amos called for people to return to God, and his plea was eloquent. I end today with one line of poetry from the book of Amos, prophecy at its best, as it hints at the glory of creation and is a pointer, a metaphor for the Creator. He who made the Pleiades and Orion, and who turns deep darkness into morning, and darkens the day into night, who calls for the waters of the sea, and pours them out upon the surface of the earth. The Lord is his name. Amos, in his heart and voice, heard that and put the prophetic question, will all the nations of the world live by such a God as this? Because it's a worthy vision indeed. A world removed from the self-proclaimed prophets of today's churches. A genuine voice from a far country. Join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more far country tales, tall ones and some true too, via the kiwiconnexion.nz. Subscribe to the channel by clicking the purple yellow button below right. And thanks for watching.